I'm on Zellnor.nyc, right? Now, he is a state senator from Brooklyn who is running for mayor in the Democratic primary this year here in New York City. He has not been in the state Senate for too long. In fact, he defeated an incumbent, Jesse Hamilton, I believe it was, who was part of what they call the IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference. And that was a power sharing agreement that some of the Democrats had with the Republicans at the time. When the Republicans were in control, they had the majority of the state Senate. They cut a deal with some Democrats to bolster their numbers, right? And in fact, I think at one point that deal is what enabled them to keep their majority. So in exchange, these Democrats got committee chairs and right different perks in the body. Well, there was a backlash to that. One of the IDC members was defeated in the primary by Zellnor Myrie, who ran on a platform of being a more pure, more true Democrat who wouldn't caucus with the Republicans. So obviously a very ambitious young man now running for mayor of the city, right? A few years after his election to the state Senate. Let's see what his platform is. If you go to Zellnor.nyc, I see Meet Zellnor. Rebuild NYC is the first thing that comes up. I don't see a link here about issues. I see endorsements, get involved, volunteer, store. I don't see it. Maybe it's under Rebuild NYC.
Yeah, let me see. That's a interesting thing to note. Nothing standing out, and I'm still having internet issues here. So when I click on Rebuild NYC, I'm just timing out right now. But it's not the website. That's my internet.
Yeah. So I just clicked on Rebuild NYC. Yeah, it's interesting. I think we noted last time that these websites now seem to be optimized for viewing on a mobile device because that's probably how most people are viewing them nowadays. And so you see kind of thin columns of text, right? A lot of white space on the sides and things like that. You got to scroll down vertically a lot to see what they're talking about. So Rebuild NYC, it says New Yorkers in all five boroughs want the same thing. A city that's safe in every neighborhood, wherever you are, whatever the hour, and a city that's affordable from housing to childcare. Okay, so that's the theme I think we had touched on before. Is it going to be safety? Is it going to be affordability? He's hitting on those two right in his mission statement here, right? Safety,
Right.
affordability. All right. Now, if you scroll down, well, what is he saying in particular? Now
Now,
he's
what I'd like, I'm actually on here right now, and what I like is we've noted this about one of the other candidates, and I don't remember who, where there's this massive wall of text, and we were saying that it would be good to have, these anchor links at the top to know where you can just jump to, and it looks like he's got this here with his mandate for 1 million homes, a public safety, public square, opportunity agenda, these things here. So
right.
I do like that.
Well, let's see if we click on them, how much information we're going to get. Mandate for 1 million homes. You click on it, it's a PDF, and it's a 26-page PDF. Okay. So,
All right. I was, you know what? Because I was scrolling that page, I thought those links were going to jump to the different sections on this
mm,
page, which is just one paragraph for each point. So I was thinking, well, his stuff is a little light,
right.
uh, but apparently it's going to PDFs, which are anything but light.
Right. Right. They're almost white papers on issues, right? Like something you might see in a journal, a policy journal. Reminds me of a law journal type article with
He's got a lot.
the
He's
volume
got
of
a
information that's on here. And he's got footnotes. He's got 26 footnotes on this one PDF. I mean, yeah, it looks like it's well researched, well put together without speaking on what he's trying to do, right? But just in terms of first glances here, there is a lot of volume.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And that's also good to see. Gives people something to get a sense of who he is. Um,
Yeah,
I like
yeah. So he starts
I
off with
like his
revitalizing NYCHA. So he's focusing on public housing there. Then he says mega midtown, new neighborhoods. Let's take a look at that. New neighborhoods, 11. I'm just skimming through this here. And you got to bring up the question, is any of this AI assisted? Perhaps. You don't know, right? It is fascinating to me. The reason why I mentioned AI, not just because of the new stories that have come out, but it doesn't seem too coincidental to me that this is the first year you're really seeing this level of detail. I don't recall ever seeing that before. All of a sudden, in the first election after AI becomes so prominent, now you're seeing candidates with 1,000 pages of information.
But I wonder if that's true, if that's the case, or did we just not look so much into the websites like that before?
Well, the thing is this, I definitely have I've looked at websites before, but normally they would be more local races, and so maybe that plays a role as well. Maybe when you're running for
Right.
mayor, you're going to have more. But the last mayor's race was 2021, and I don't recall this level of detail. Maybe some
Mm,
candidates had it. Maybe we could
mm.
use the Wayback Machine and take a look at some point. Like, did Eric Adams have this much detail on his website when he ran for mayor in 2021? I
That's a good.
don't think I wouldn't think so. But then again, I was wrong because I didn't expect Cuomo and his other candidates to have this much this year either. So
Right.
maybe there was, right? But this is more than I'm used to seeing. I never really encountered this much information before on a candidate's website.
Now he's got a couple of things pointed out here. Rebuild NYC, well, I guess this is a plan he's talking about, will increase the allowable density and apply mandatory inclusionary housing in Midtown. Um, Increasing the allowable density.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what do you think about that? It makes it, and I focus on that because I visited Hong Kong a few years back, and that was the only term I could use to describe it. It was dense. And I don't know if that was comfortable. Like you still
Oh,
need
that's
space.
that is a tension that you're seeing right now in New York City, right? And that the whole city of yes thing really just tries to speak to that. Where look, there is a housing shortage in the city,
Absolutely.
right? We have a homelessness issue. Obviously, we came off the migrant crisis and so forth. And so, what is the solution? If you're trying to ensure more people are housed in the city, well, you only have so much land. And so,
Mm,
at a certain point, you're going to have to struggle with density to some degree, right? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of talk about building up, right? And so, no longer allowing one story structures to dominate the landscape, right? Saying, well, every neighborhood is going to have its share of building up, right? So if you have one story structures that now have, let's say, stores, right? A block of retail where there's just one story, we're going to have to start building apartments on top of all these stores. That's the conversation that's happening. And obviously, a lot of neighborhoods are pushing back against that, saying
right,
you're destroying the character of our neighborhoods, right?
right,
I think the beauty of New York City is it's such a diverse place in more ways than one. It's diverse geographically, it's diverse ethnically, right? It's diverse in terms of the character and feel of the neighborhoods. You have more suburban areas in New York City, you have more urban areas, you have more areas where people are all right on the subways and the buses, and the areas where people are driving where it's more spread out, and it looks more like the suburbs, and it's all different areas, all different configurations. And so there is a danger, I think, if your policy is let's make everything dense. You don't want New York City to become a monolith, right? You don't want it to all look the same and feel the same and be the same. You want, I think, to the extent possible, to be able to have different neighborhoods with their own distinct feel. And so
mm,
there are areas that are already dense. Are they too dense? Can they not take on more density? Perhaps, but maybe you should be looking at it in terms of which areas does that seem more appropriate versus completely redefining what an area used to be.
right. And to be fair, there is a lot of detail here on, what this means as far as where he's coming from, as far as increasing the allowable density. He's talking about current office vacancy rate is over 20%.
Right.
And so, there's going to be less demand for some of these offices, which could open up space for, residential locations. But it looks like in the plan I guess there's a plan out there, it's Rebuild NYC, to make use of some of this space. There is no mandate for inclusionary housing in Midtown.
Mhm.
So I think this also attempts to address that as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at the new neighborhoods section of this PDF here, he's talking about producing up to 85 new housing units through the creation
85,000.
85,000 housing units through the creation of new neighborhoods throughout the city. And it starts off with a story about how Battery Park City used to be 90 acres of undeveloped piers, and now it's home to 16,000 New Yorkers. He doesn't, he talks about Roosevelt Island as well. It was isolated and obsolete 50 years ago, now has thousands of housing units, etc. He's not talking, though, as far as I can see. Okay, he does mention Aqueduct Racetrack. That's right over here. But he does leave it a little bit vague as far as what these new neighborhoods are all going to be. It says, in addition to existing proposals for new neighborhoods and those that the Myrie administration comes up with internally, the Myrie administration will launch an initiative to solicit ideas from the public for new neighborhoods that will contribute to the goal of 85,000 new homes. That sounds good on paper or on this PDF. How's that going to work in practice? If you're leaving that to the public, you know what ends up happening? Everyone in a given area is going to say, not here, how about there? They're all going to be pointing fingers at each other. And then who's going to win? It's probably the areas that are most organized, maybe have the most powerful voices speaking for them. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's necessarily the way to do it. Because who's going to say, listen, our neighborhood needs a lot more density. Why don't you build more housing on top of my house? Like, people don't generally say that.
Right. Well, we're also, be fair. There's more detail. We're just skimming at the moment, because it looks like going down into the next page, he's talking about sandwich rezonings. So in an effort to reach that 85,000 new housing unit number, he's also talking about using small industrial areas that are sandwiched between residential neighborhoods. So if those aren't being used as well,
right,
then they could be rezoned.
And listen, you're seeing a lot of development happening right now at Belmont. I'm sure you're familiar with the Belmont racetrack area.
Right.
Many acres there of space, and now there's talk of, well, why do we need to have horses at Belmont and Aqueduct in the same area, right? That, of course, would leave more room to build something or multiple things at Aqueduct, right? Maybe expanding resorts or building more there. But you are seeing that. You're seeing between Belmont and now Aqueduct a lot more development. I'm not opposed to that. It's just, I think, a matter of how it's done, and is it done in a way that doesn't burden existing neighborhoods, right? And like I said, it's difficult because generally speaking, every neighborhood is going to say no to something like this.
Right.
But I think
not in my backyard.
Yeah, right. But there's also compromise, I think, to be found here, right? Like
sure.
Talking about with the bike lane issue, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing, right? As long as you have, I think, the stakeholders of the neighborhood part of the conversation, I think you sometimes do find common ground, right? You might find something like, well, we're not opposed to this entirely as long as certain provisions are met, right? And they'll start talking about, well, what is that going to do, for example, to the overcrowding of our schools? Are you going to build more schools, more classrooms? What about?
Right, that's a good point. If you bring in 85,000 new units.
Exactly. Our infrastructure. They even start talking about, well, sometimes a developer comes in and wants to bring in a supermarket, and then there's a conversation. Well, what supermarket are you bringing in? Is it going to be Trader Joe's? Is it going to be whatever? I mean, there are negotiations that take place, right? And I think those are appropriate. I just think that a big part of the problem has been that the city of New York has dictated to the neighborhoods what is to happen within those neighborhoods without seriously considering input from the neighborhoods. And I think that goes both ways, right? I think if that dialogue can be opened and can be taken seriously, because we do have the community boards, we do have mechanisms in place that are supposed to facilitate this, but oftentimes they're not really respected the way they should be, right? If that respect is there and that dialogue, I think, is sincere, I think a lot can get done, because we all recognize these are real issues, right? I think most people are reasonable, even if they might not want certain things in their neighborhood. They understand something has to be done, and everyone's going to have to bear some of the burden here, right? But do it in a fair way, and do it in a way that considers all voices, I would say.
Right. Looking at some of these other points here, I clicked on the frontline agenda. And right away in this frontline agenda, it seems to me that this is a place where he's definitely going to distinguish himself from some of the other candidates that we've looked at so far, where his first paragraph here is taking a definitive stand against the current MAGA movement, MAGA Republicans, and the administration in Washington,
Hmm.
um, saying that the truth is no amount of capitulation will satisfy the fascists in Washington. It's time for New Yorkers to stop hoping that if we play nice, then MAGA Republicans will leave us alone. Instead, we must tell Donald Trump, you want us to drop dead, but we're New Yorkers, you can't kill us. And he's taken a quote here, the president is not a king and New York City is not his subject. Like he's taking a definite stand here for New York.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that he is an attorney as well. So I like, if you look at page 3 of his frontline agenda, it says, we will fight like hell in the courts against these blatant violations of the 10th Amendment and the American constitutional order. And so
Right.
that's worth pointing out, right? That he is talking about legal and constitutional violations by the federal government against New York. And as mayor,
Right.
being a lawyer, especially, right, he should know what's going on and how to fight this legally, right? He said, we'll fight
Right.
hell in the courts. Maybe he'll roll up his sleeves and take an active role in doing that, right? Not just
Right.
having lawyers on staff. Maybe he can be in those rooms also to help direct some of that legal strategy. I think that's
Right.
an asset that he brings to the table.
Right, and it from at least from this, it sounds like he's not afraid to take on that fight. Whereas we're seeing a lot, or people are either not addressing it or they are trying to remain as cordial as possible.
Mm.
Where he's drawing a line in the sand here and saying, you know what, this is, you want it, this I want the smoke, let's do it. So
Right. The
that's
different from Cuomo's
differentiate
approach.
him. I'm
Yeah.
sorry?
I said different from Cuomo's approach because Cuomo seems to
Right.
be doing what you just described, being more diplomatic about it and saying we want
Right.
to have more of a positive relationship with the administration.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so this one point here that just stood out to differentiate him from some of the other candidates. I haven't seen any of them be this definitive in the stuff that we're seeing on their sites.
Well, we did see, I think Brad Lander has something to that effect, stand up against Musk and Trump. And I think he
It's
even
true.
had
You're
one of
right.
the major points when he was talking about, was it safety? I think we kind of giggled at that I think he might have even put that under public safety.
Right. But this is a full 9-page report.
All right.
And it seems like this is definitely standing up to what's happening with the federal government. And Trump's gutting federal civil rights protections. The city must ensure our rights are protected. So he goes in talking about strengthening protections
Right
for
there.
New Yorkers' civil rights, commissions on rights funding, um, securing the finances about the executive's threats to withhold funds constitute a similar form of
Mhm.
coercion. So yeah, he's making it known that he's ready to take that battle.
Now I'm looking at his public safety and public square PDF here. He's got a
Right.
map to solve every shooting in New York City. Well, that's ambitious. To
So
solve,
he's got a what?
it says a roadmap to solve every shooting in New York City.
That is very ambitious. I'm curious what that entails.
60% of shootings in New York City go unsolved in any given year. He's talking about clearance rates here. Okay, but how are you going to solve every shooting in New York City?
Yeah. He's got a plan here to reverse the years of decline in the number of NYPD detectives.
2,000 new detectives he's talking about. Now, these would go to try to solve these outstanding homicides, I guess.
Right. And I guess he's saying by correlation that would solving them would reduce the shootings because people are being held accountable.
Well, how about this? A Clear 100 task force. He will launch a City Hall Clear 100 task force that includes City Hall, district attorneys, and the NYPD to review clearance rates on a precinct by precinct basis. Consistent engagement from City Hall will help lift interagency barriers and ensure the NYPD meets the goals of Clear 100. I like the way he's thinking about this.
Hmm.
You know, I was just talking about how the city oftentimes dictates to the communities. There's, we're going to do this to you as opposed to we want to work with you. Here he's talking about City Hall working with others, right? He said precinct by precinct basis. So let's go to all the different communities across the city and figure out what we can do to help their endeavors. That just
Right.
sounds more collaborative in its approach. You know what I mean? I like that from a philosophical point of view.
Right.
It says here, monitor effectiveness and adopt strategies based on observed outcomes and evolving community needs, right? A lot of this has to be done, as we mentioned. Maybe this is a bottom line forming. A community by community approach is often appropriate.
Right. I do like you go further down on page 7 is a restoring accountability section, and he's got a point in there that I like seeing where he's saying dismiss police officers with repeated and or severe substantiated claims of misconduct. So earlier he was saying basically bring on some more to help solve the cases, but he's also saying let's hold the bad actors accountable
Sure.
and dismiss them. So I do like that approach because when you just say let's throw some more police at it without trying to look at some of the other failings in the system, then you could create an issue that's uh, more difficult for the police, not for the police, but for the citizens. So I like this idea of holding them more
You
accountable.
you broke up for a second there. You said more something for the citizens. I didn't get what you said.
It makes things more difficult for the citizens, especially ones that feel oppressed by some of the tactics of police and the bad actors, and not being held accountable. So having that as a focus to me is something I like to see.
Right, right. He says NYPD has lost more than 1,500 detectives over the last 25 years. So to your point, we
Right.
want to hire a lot of new ones, but let go of the ones that seem to be bad. I do still want to see some form of due process, if you want to call it that. You don't just want to dismiss people who have accusations against them, but if they've been substantiated, right? Obviously, you don't have to have a criminal conviction for this to apply if you lose your job,
Right.
but at least some finding I would like to see of wrongdoing, not just someone complaining about you.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, he's got, I mean, clearly over 100 pages of stuff here.
yeah.
He's got this opportunity agenda, which looks to address jobs, after school programs, schooling, 3K, pre-K, universal summer youth employment. Um,
Let me ask you a
so
question, because I'm looking at this and you're right. There's a lot of stuff here, and I had the thought in my head a second ago. Oh, he could be the ideas candidate. We talked about Zoran being the idea.
right.
He could be, but here's my
But
question.
he's not getting the eyes on his campaign as
Oh,
Zora.
could it be, aside from the fact that he's not running in the DSA lane and so forth, he's not looked at as the most ideologically pure on the left? Okay, putting that aside, could it be that while he does have a large volume of ideas here, there's nothing that strikes you as too sexy or exciting, right? Something you would want to put in a news story, because these ideas, they for the most part look pretty solid on paper, right? And maybe they are good ideas, but do they generate a whole lot of interest, or are people gonna be like, ah, this is kind of boring?
But I get what you're saying on that, but it also makes me, I think we've kind of touched on it before. Like, does it have to be sexy? Like
Agree.
these are issues that the roll up your sleeves and get the job done
Yeah,
types of issues, and those generally aren't sexy
I
or
agree.
flashy types of things. It's like bread and butter types of things, getting some things together.
Sure.
And that could be, again, like the fault of media that are only looking for those sexy or
Right. But that's
controversial.
the thing, right? If you're going to write a story on a mayoral candidate pitching a big idea, are you going to use one of these, or are you going to use Zoran talking about government run grocery stores? I think that kind of jumps off the page.
Right. Right. Because not only does it present an idea that's a little bit out of the box, but also it can capture that crowd that's looking at, oh, the socialism aspect of it. Why is government controlling the social? And so now you've got, sensationalism, you've got out of the box, you've
You
got
know,
some kind of
right.
flashy story.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what that is? More clicks and more money for the media, right? So
Right, right, right.
they're going to be focusing on that. But should the candidates be trying to pitch ideas, or at least maybe take one or two ideas on that are going to draw that kind of attention. They don't have to be that divisive, right? They don't have to be seen as a socialist
Right.
takeover, but maybe there are ways to garner more attention with your ideas. I mean, I think that's
Right.
really what I'm trying to get out of here, right? Because he does have the ideas, but no one is really talking about, oh, Zellnor Myrie, he's got a ton of ideas, bro. I haven't heard that in the streets. You know what I mean?
Right.
What is
The
the
streets
disconnect there?
not talking.
Yeah, there's no buzz over it. What's the disconnect there? Should
And
he
and
be
I
out
think
there trying to present something that does come off a little more flashy?
And I think, you know what, from what we're seeing here, like you said, there's ideas, there are ideas. There should be some more talk around it because there are ideas on the table. Um, and the fact that media may not pick up on it because they're not sexy ideas. These are, some straightforward, uh, let's get some things done types of ideas. The campaign and the candidate should be aware that that's how the media is going to play it, and they have to figure out their communication strategy to make it appealing
Yep.
to media to cover it more.
I want to see him out on the street with the graph, the charts, props,
Something,
something, yeah, to get people's attention. Be attention drawing because you don't want to be looked at as like that boring nerd, that wonky guy. Like, yeah, he's got ideas, but he's putting us all to sleep. This is an election, and there's a difference between winning a campaign and governing, right? And these ideas sound great, maybe for governing, but are they
right?
going to get him elected mayor of New York City? To get elected mayor of New York City, you kind of got to be larger than life. You got to stand out. You know what I mean? Like you got to be flashy on a certain degree. There was an old saying: "You campaign in poetry, you govern in prose." Where's the
Mm,
poetry from Zellnor, right? Because he doesn't want to be seen as that guy that puts us all to sleep with his good ideas. Now, you and I like seeing good ideas, and I'm sure there are other voters who do as well. But
yeah,
first of all, you got to get those ideas before the people, and you got to get people talking
right.
about those ideas. You know what I mean? You got to create a buzz. It's like dropping a mixtape. You got to create a buzz. So
Yeah.
where's his mixtape?
Yeah, getting those eyes, he's got to get those eyes trained on him so they can see his ideas.
Right,
Uh,
right. And he's got to
all
present
right.
them, I think, in a dynamic kind of way. It is not easy. It's not an easy task. It's like you need
No,
to
it's not easy at all.
you
Absolutely not.
got to have the sizzle and the steak to win this kind of election.
Right. But I do like where he's coming from what we've seen so far.